Just wanted to.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please stand. We're going to recite the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for coming out. Your concerns. The president, I think Carrie's going to be here soon. Weather conditions, and I think Ken's going to be here soon also. But we're a little bit behind with the weather conditions. If everybody has an agenda, I don't know if you do. I think there's some back here. We're going to go into informational items. And the first thing on the agenda is the proposed plans for the Mary Crapo building. And I'm going to turn it over to our superintendent, Ben, Micah. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you. Well, thank all of you for showing up tonight. It's great to see everybody show up in such great support. So some of you are here for a different reason than the person next to you. Some of you are here just to kind of hear. You've heard that we've been talking about the Mary Crapo building, and I want to just say a few words about that. And we also have completed a comprehensive facilities audit. And the facilities audit was done by NJB Architecture, and they have done a comprehensive look at all of our existing facilities. That, coupled with our need to discuss our proposal for the Mary Crapo building, facilitated the need to have this meeting tonight. So we appreciate all of you showing up. We appreciate you being here. And hopefully we'll have time as well for you to ask questions of the board or myself, and we'll be able to get into that. So Mary Crapo, as hopefully all of you know, is right in the heart of town, and it's a historic building, and it brings with it a tremendous amount of memories and nostalgia. I know in having conversations with the Thompsons and many others in our community, just what this building means to them and also to our community is a significant thing. And so this building, when we started talking about what types of things need to or don't need to happen with this building, obviously that was a difficult conversation. And so we've been wrestling with this for a few months now. And so I'll get to some of the specific challenges, but I wanted to just let you know that we've been running Mary Crapo for a very long time. The building has been around for a significant portion of years, and there have been many classes. In fact, Lorraine Ahern and I had a chance to go and visit with some of the past graduating classes from the, was it the 40s or 50s? I know 50s.
They had it together. But
they had it together.
Yes.
So 40s, 50s kind of generation, and many of them had been through this building and obviously had many, many fond memories of this space. While the building does have a tremendous amount of nostalgia, it does have some issues. The building, from when it was constructed till when it is to where it is now, I'm going to do just some brief snapshots. Might be difficult to see, but obviously a building that is as old as Mary Crapo, we have some foundational issues. There's some cracking. Many of the doors in the building have been replaced, but we also have some that still need to be addressed. There are places around the facilities, and these were just taken over the course of the last month or two. Entrances, roof structures, and this facility, this structure was looked at by the comprehensive facility audit. The parking lot situation, drainage, the piping and electrical systems. One of the things that when this building was built, cast iron was the preferred method of plumbing. So now anytime we have a renovation or something that needs to be fixed, we're getting into significant cost. We do have parts of the building that we've had to deal with that have had different types of mold, different rot in different sills and parts of the building. I think one of the most significant one that was really kind of alarming to me, this happened in one of our classrooms, and thankfully there were no children around, nobody was hurt, but a teacher went to place her hand on the sill, and that chunk of concrete just crumbled off and fell down. And so we're dealing with a building that needs a lot of attention. And we have known that, and so we're always thinking about, okay, well, what types of things do we need to do quickly? And we've addressed those over the past several years. With the facility study, it became apparent that there were several things that need to be addressed outside of just what we're looking at here, but also code deficiencies and things like that. So I want to talk about a few of the challenges that come with the Mary Crapo building. And this has been, through the facilities audit, this has become apparent to us, and it also has been something that we've known. I would say the thing that prompted all of this several months ago is that we had a fire inspection. And the fire inspection did not pass. And we have done, and I will give a lot of credit to Dave Samancic and our maintenance staff, they have done a tremendous job of finding out what do we have to do to make sure that the kids are safe. And the kids are safe. But one of the things that they had to do, for example, was to install temporary fire alarms all around the building. And so they spent time, and there's all sorts of different metrics that you have to use to do that. But as one example, in order for us to be able to maintain our operating, in fact, they said by January 1, you have to install a complete fire suppression system. Well, the quotes for the fire suppression system run around $70,000, okay? When you start to look at just that, you start to say, okay, well, what else needs to be done? Well, the report had about another $30,000 to $40,000 of temporary upgrades, such as closers on doors and things like that that the fire code requires. Okay, and these things change all the time. So we may have been in compliance 5 years ago, now we're not in compliance. We have been successful in being able to get a variance by many of the temporary fixes that we've been able to do and moving things around and this and that. But it's only temporary. And so we will have to invest significant amount of money into Mary Crapo just to keep it operating at a very basic level. That's not addressing any of the pictures that you saw. Okay? So some of the challenges, I talk about the fire inspection. Last year our operating costs alone were $117,000. And the facility last year operating at $117,000 was in a mild winter. So last year's winter was not very cold, and the cost significantly was still significant. In prior years, that number has reached up to $130,000. Okay, just depending on how cold the winter is and how harsh it is. The facility audit revealed $6.2 million in renovations to bring the building up to standard and reconcile all code deficiencies. So if you think about the ADA compliance, if you think about fire code, those are just a couple of the many deficiencies that we have to address. The building would need significant amount of money. The district does not have $6.2 million to bring it up to code and say this is where it needs to be operating at a top-notch area. So the necessary expenses to keep it operating at a minimal level of operation totals around $508,000, which includes the complete fire suppression system and multiple other pressing priorities. There's several leaks in roofs, and we have several other things, for example, that would total that roughly $500,000 that we would need to invest in Mary Crapo to keep it operating at a bare minimum. Okay, that's not the $6.2 million, that's just trying to keep the doors open. Okay? So these are significant challenges that we face. And so while we definitely are sensitive to the fact that there is a desire to keep the building and have the building operate and have children in there, it is a financial liability to the district. And we have to think in terms of what's best for our children and our community at the same time. But when we talk about what's best for our children and we're spending this kind of money on this facility, what's the long-term payout? Quite frankly, this is just the tip of the iceberg. So we would be paying on many other upgrades like this for quite some time. So we have a program. There's two primary programs that I'd like to talk about tonight. And so the first one's going to be our Child Development Center. Our Child Development Center is a full-service, comprehensive child care facility. And I will say that it is an amazing facility. We have amazing people that work there. In fact, many of them are here tonight in the audience, which is great to see them showing up tonight. Our comprehensive early childhood program at Mary Crapo includes our GSRP classroom, which is our Great Start Readiness program. It includes tuition-based child care, tuition-based pre-K programs, before and after school care, and even infant and toddler care. So we have in one wing of the Mary Crapo building our Child Development Center. Okay? Based on the aforementioned challenges that we face, we have been exploring what would we do if we had to vacate Mary Crapo. And we all know that we had a high priority on this program as well as our alternative education program. So the priority was that those two programs were going to remain in existence. In fact, if we could find a way to enhance those programs in the same time, then that would be great. So we looked at how can we maximize our efficiency, how can we take a program like this and improve it and create a better service for our parents and families as well. So I'm going to talk about our plans, our proposed plan for the Child Development Center. The board and I have been having conversations. We've been looking at different options. And so the proposed new home for the Child Development Center is actually at 4437 Morris Road. This facility is a doctor's office, actually a former doctor's office, that is housed right next to St. Mary's. If you're heading north on Morris Road, it's just before you get to 69. It's on the south side of the St. Mary's campus there. And so I wanted to highlight a couple things about this potential option for us. We have an agreed purchase price of $250,000. Okay? Now this is below the appraised value of the building. We've done our due diligence. This amount of money is very reasonable. In fact, if you have ever thought about building your own house, or if you've ever heard about purchasing existing commercial space, this is around $30 a square foot for this space. You can't find space even to lease or rent for $30 a square foot. So we feel very good about that opportunity, and part of the reason why we were able to get that price, for those of you that know, that's been sitting vacant for quite some time. So the inside is a former doctor's office. It's all cut up into little office spaces, and so that would be the purchase price for the building. We would need to renovate the interior spaces to create a new early learning center, primarily using GSRP funds. So we have GSRP grant dollars, which are the Great Start Readiness Program. We have grant dollars which don't affect our general fund. We have already started the ball rolling on seeing what we could do to propose a plan for those renovations. So that would be a tremendous benefit to us, because we have rollover monies from last year in that grant that could be used potentially for this purpose. So the interior would be essentially recreated to meet our needs exactly the way that we would need them. So the specifications would allow for many of our classrooms to be there and to create a brand new facility. It's close to I-69 and the expressway for parents. And we're going to be entering into a partnership with St. Mary's Church. And so we're always looking at partnerships within our community, both with churches and businesses and other organizations. One of the great things about St. Mary's is that they have a tremendously large parking area right there that is very safe. They also have a large playground area as well in the back. And so they would be inviting us in as partners to be able to share that space. And that's just a tremendous opportunity, I think, for a community connection as well as for our students. The cost-effective operation with the newer mechanical systems on this space is significant. It's very difficult to pare down what the utilities would be. We've had many conversations with consumers. So we actually did, and I'm going to give you a cost analysis here in a second, we actually took a square foot comparison price. So we said, okay, this is what we're spending on operating Mary Crapo, and it's this many square feet. How many square feet is this building? And we're basically doing a calculation off of that. And so even that is about $92,000 less a year just in operating expenses alone. And so we expect that that number is going to be even better, because it's a newer building with better insulation, better mechanical systems, so on and so forth. One thing, not that this is the deal breaker, but for our children in that facility to have air-conditioned space is a tremendously good thing for them. We would be able to build this facility. It would be something I think we can be very proud of. It would be a state-of-the-art early learning center. Now, I don't want to minimize the fact that we do have some classrooms that wouldn't necessarily fit right into that footprint, because obviously the space they occupy at Mary Crapo is quite large. So we have had conversations, and Dave has been working on looking at alternatives, and so we've been looking at the potential of having, and our plan is to have before and after school care actually at the elementary schools themselves. Gaines Elementary already has this type of a model, and so we'd be replicating that type of a model throughout our community. So for parents, in terms of a service opportunity for them, their children would not have to be bused to a centralized location. We're able to do that on site at the actual buildings themselves. So we'll be able to continue all of the same services that we did before, but I believe that they'll be better. And I think the facility, because it's going to be a newer facility, will be a great point of pride for those kids. I'd like to talk a little bit about Swartz Creek Academy, and we will have time for questions for sure. So Swartz Creek Academy is a comprehensive alternative education program. It is, for those of you that know Mr. Thompson, he has championed this program for a number of years. But we not only have the Swartz Creek Academy, which was for our school-age children, we also cater to a number of students now who are more non-traditional in our adult education program. We've been awarded multiple grants through adult education to be able to fund and run adult ed programs. So you think of the person who was unable to finish their diploma, maybe they were they had a teen pregnancy, and now they're trying to get back and be employable and be tremendously helpful to society. We're able to offer this service where they can go back, they can get their GED, and be a vibrant community member. So these programs also were something that we felt were very important to maintain. So of course the question becomes, where would they go? And we had many conversations about what that would look like. The facility study actually brought about a possibility for us that was something that we hadn't originally thought of. And this would be over at the 400 wing of the high school. So the existing high school, the 400 wing is actually the oldest part of Swartz Creek High School. In fact, if you've known, you may not know this, but our bleachers are on the wrong side of the field. I don't know if you've ever known that before. But when you walk into that entrance, it's because that was the original building right there, the 400 wing of Swartz Creek High School. And so as a result of that space being what it is, it provided us with an opportunity because it's separate. Our students that go to the academy, they go to the academy for an alternative option. They don't go to the academy for high school 2.0. They go to the academy because they need something different. They learn a little bit differently. And so they need to have a space that's somewhat separate. The program is run differently than a traditional high school. So these spaces would occupy a few of the classrooms on it would be the easternmost wing of that 400 hallway. And it's hard to see from this print, but essentially you would have a exit, okay, for fire purposes, that you could get out of that wing from the academy, but you could not get into the high school. And conversely, you could get out of the high school space, but you could not get into the academy space. So it would be its own self-contained area with its own entrance over on this side of the facility. Okay? So we have the capacity within our high school right now to create this self-contained independent location for our academy students. And with that renovation, it does help a little bit with some of our operating costs because there is some energy efficiency that will be realized when we have to renovate some of those windows on that eastern side, or the southern side, I should say. So this would be our plan, our proposed plan for where we would move the academy. Now I probably got ahead of myself. I want to make sure I've just said the two main purposes of this meeting are those two programs. These two programs we would not be looking at doing this until after this school year is over. So we've received variances from the fire inspector to allow us to operate as we are. We've made many adjustments to the plan that they had failed us on originally. So this would allow us the opportunity to maintain operation, and then in the fall of 2018, this would be the new home for the academy and obviously our child development, our early learning center, that program would start in July. In the summer months, because many of our families rely on that service. So we're committed to trying to make sure that we don't have a gap in opportunity of service for our families. So in terms of the future of Mary Crapo, and I know that some of you have come for that reason, so I hope I've given you a little information on what our proposed plan would be for the Academy, what our proposed plan would be for the Early Childhood Center. In terms of the future of the building, we've been having conversations about that, and we continue to do so. The one thing that we have had discussions about is that there are possible suitors, such as groups like the WODA Group, or there's several community-based organizations that are even closer here in Michigan. If you're familiar with that, WODA Group renovated the Sycamore House in Durand. It was a project that they had a building. They came in, they renovated it. It's now senior living spaces. Which was a tremendously successful project. Our concern, I would say first and foremost, is that we are committed to make sure that Mary Crapo is maintained. We do not want this building to become an eyesore of any kind. And so basically through our conversations, if we were to maintain the alarm system, the lighting, the outside sign obviously, and the grounds, and making sure that for anybody driving down Miller Road during the day, obviously there wouldn't be children in there, but you wouldn't notice a difference in the building when you drive by it. We have other opportunities that are coming, obviously, to this area, some that we can't predict, and so we are having conversations as a board about what we might do with that facility, and I certainly think we'll be coming out to the community again once we know or have more information on that. But for right now, our immediate concern was what would we do if we had to vacate and we had to find a new home for these programs, and that's why we wanted to center and focus our attention on that. So I wanted to save time for questions. If you have questions for myself or for the board, feel free to ask those. Before I turn it over to that, we will have a brief, I guess, intermission or break. If you'd like to stick around, we're going to start sharing some high-level information from the facility study as well tonight. So we'll be ready to do that after the Q&A session. So if anybody would like to ask a question of myself or any of the board, and obviously board, if you'd like to make comment as well. So, yes.
I thank you for your time in explaining this to us this evening. Sure. My question is in regards to the school-aged children. What options would we have for them during days that the schools are closed as well as during the summer for child care?
It's a great question. So right now, Dave, would you like to maybe take that a little bit and explain what we do right now for school-aged children?
Sure.
During that time?
Sure. For school-aged children right now, we have it in one location. I think that's what you're talking about. And so when I talked to Ben about this, it would be similar to, how do we work with gains, to ensure that those kids still get care, and we help the parents. I think that's one of the things that we wanted to start working with the parent or the principals on as well, is how can we do that? And if we are in one location, like this new building that we have, how can we kind of use that facility to still do that? Like over Christmas, I think we have like 18 kids who will be there. On whatever days we have now, sometimes we have it open, but it really depends on the weather. So that's something that Ben and I have talked about too. And summer care is something else we're going to talk about as well, simply because with this transition over the summer, that's kind of one of my big concerns as well, is the summer program we have going on. How is that going to affect what we do this summer? Because I know a lot of parents can count on that as well. Well, at this point, we still need to go ahead and talk to everybody. But my concern is that we still have the same level of care for all my kids. And I consider your kids my kids. So, I don't want to go ahead and not help any of those students. So like I said, this summer, we're going to still, try to make that happen. Absolutely. We just don't know where at this point.
So the idea would be that our hope is, and he's trying to be very non-committal, which is the right move, and so I appreciate that, and he's doing a great job. But our plan is to try and have this thing wrapped up and done, the renovations completed, so that by the time we have to vacate Mary Crapo, it's like a weekend of all of us like pitching in and moving everything over there, and then it's like, okay, we're ready to move in and start operation in the new facility. So we would have all of our inspections lined up so that they could be ready for July 1, so that there's no interruption of service. The other, and we obviously have to communicate those dates as they get closer. And then I think the other piece to this that I didn't really mention, some of the equipment that we've purchased, for example, for the kitchen at Mary Crapo, we're going to be taking over with us so that we use that equipment. So we're able to keep the equipment and everything into the new space, cook the hot meals for the children on site. And obviously we have a ton of resources there already in terms of whether it's technology, toys, tables, all of those things that are in real good shape that we're going to maintain as well. Yes, sir.
What will the new CBC capacity be like? Will there be room to grow?
Great question. So I'm going to answer that in two parts. Yes, there will be room to expand our the existing facility. With our parking lot situation to the north, we have the ability to have adequate parking as much as we would ever need. There is a small parking area to the south that in the event that we would need to expand, we would be able to put an expansion that way, if that time came. What we feel is that we have adequate space to easily accommodate all of our children that we have now, and plus a little bit of growth. But I guess it would just depend on I guess magnitude of the growth would depend. So there is existing space on the site, but our plan would be right now is to have at the elementary schools, have some of these programs operating in the elementary schools, and then we have the vast majority of our existing programs, for example, the 2 infant toddler rooms and the GSRP classrooms and everything on that one site. Good question. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Jim Nelson. You've never met me before.
Nice to meet you.
But I've been teaching at Mary Crapo for 35 years, karate instructor. Some of you know who I am. And we are concerned about, we are there on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. What facility do you have planned for us?
That's a great question. And I don't have a perfect answer for that. But what I can say is that with our cage, the community center that we're trying to establish out there, we are trying to create opportunities for that to be used in multiple capacities, not just as a basketball facility. So, as you know, we run pickleball there. We just started a JROTC program there, and we're looking to try and create other opportunities. So that might be a good opportunity to have karate taken at the cage, community center. Otherwise, we are going to work to try and make sure that any of our existing programs, such as our community ed programs like karate, be maintained. I don't have an exact plan on where that would be yet. But I can tell you that we will find a place for you.
Okay. Do you have a garage?
Yeah, we could probably find a garage. There's some huts out there. Yes, sir.
What are the details on St. Mary's and Swartz Creek in regards to the partnership you've got going with them? Is there anything that we do for them where they're helping us out? Or?
They, in talking with the leadership there, they have just basically told me we had started a pastor's luncheon this year, and we met a couple times, and we've continued that through our community mission board. And the leadership basically came to us and they said, anything you can think of that we could do to partner with the school somehow would be wonderful. So when we approached them about this, their eyes lit up. They said, this is going to be the greatest thing ever. We kind of, said, well, we're going to have to get some things laid out. So the idea is that we would have an agreement. It would basically be a use agreement to use the playground facilities. Their playground facilities don't necessarily match all of our requirements to run our early childhood programs. So we would be bringing over our equipment as well, and we would also be putting in a couple other areas because, for example, for infants and toddlers, you have to have a specialized space for them. You have to have, they go down to, the requirements are your mulch has to be so deep and all of these other types of things. So we're going to be basically expanding the space that they have there, and we're going to, they're going to be giving us use of that parking lot, which they already allow for the MDOT program that occurs there as well. So In terms of financial, it's basically sharing space and resources. We're going to be enhancing the space that they have, but there's not going to be a financial, you know, give and take. It's basically them saying we're happy to have you here as partners, and us being good stewards and helping to upgrade those pieces of equipment as necessary. Yes.
Are you looking at selling their Crapo?
So that's a great question. We are having conversations about that. I would say that every board member has a little bit of a different take. You can speak up at any time if you have anything to add. So I don't want to speak for you, but essentially the conversation is if there is somebody that's willing to purchase it, right, that would have that we understand what would be used for, we're open to that possibility. Our concern is that we don't necessarily have a good idea on, okay, are they going to want the whole city block, which is close to a whole city block that we own there with the fields and everything else? Or are we talking about just the structure? What types of things would it be used for? So we are very community minded. Obviously we are here in this community, so we want to make sure that it's a good project. So we would be probably more inclined to maintain the facility and wait until we found a good solution for the facility before we would just say, let's just, you know, send it out. But I don't want to speak for any of you. So
part 2 to that.
Okay, sure.
Can you sell it? Has anybody done the homework to see if you can sell those?
So yes, I've talked with the Crapo family. There's several of them. So this is many generations down the line now. There was an alleged agreement at one time that said that it had to go back to the family. Every person from the family that I've talked to has said, absolutely not, there is no agreement like that, and we don't want it. So I don't know. We have not been able to find any document to that effect, but obviously if that's something that would be enforced, we would gladly, you know, go in that direction.
They don't want it back because of the cost.
They do not want it back because of the cost. Yeah.
But it honestly requires a trip downtown, because I've done the homework on it 2 years ago when all this came about closing something.
Yep.
And it literally requires when going downtown and looking at the title work. Because regardless if the Crapo family wants it back or not, you're going to have to go with whatever the records say.
Yep. Exactly. The title work and all of that investigative work is something that we have to do a much deeper dive. So I don't want to stand here today and say that we have it all figured out. At this point, we're not prepared to sell the building because we don't know all of those details yet. If that possibility became a possibility, a good possibility, then obviously we would have to go into the title work and do all of those types of things.
So I just added the part 3. I mean, realistically, someone should look into that, because if you could give it back, wouldn't that be the best option?
It would be.
I mean, I hate to say dump it back on them, but realistically, if you could give it back to the people that gave you the property in the beginning, that might be a very feasible option to get the school district out of that.
Correct. Yeah, we're going to definitely look at all of those types of things. I tell you what prompted the speed of this. This happened very quickly because we had a fire inspection. They basically said, you got to stop operations and get out January 1. We're like, that's not possible. There is no way that's possible. So thankfully, they've been very gracious with us. We've worked through a lot of these things with them, and they're allowing us to maintain our operations so that we can get all of our ducks in a row for this. Good question. Yes, sir.
Something similar to that, but you're still going to have to maintain the building.
Yes.
You're still going to have to fix the road. You're still going to have to take care of some deficiencies to keep it. So there's really no savings in not using the building, because now you're spent $628,000 to renovate 2 other spaces, plus you still have to pay $117,000 to keep the lights on, maintenance. I mean, that should be part of it too, shouldn't it? Because it will cost the same amount to maintain it.
Yeah, so the operational costs will be significantly lowered because what we're talking about doing are basically maintaining the grounds, making sure the alarm system stays on. For example, there's a boiler over there that's relatively new that we can repurpose in one of our other larger facilities. So in terms of operating costs, the operating costs will be a small fraction of what they were. We're talking about basically maintaining the outside infrastructure so that when people drive by, they don't notice that it's a vacant building.
So you're turning the heat off in the winter?
This is the conversation that we've had, and the answer that we've been given would be yes. So we would turn the heat off.
So the plants will freeze and then shut the water.
It'd be winterized. So there's a winterization process, but yes, when we vacate the property would be empty. No. Yes.
Okay, so I just want to ask a question again.
Sure.
I have 2 kids, both at Gates. One's a kindergartner and one is at the daycare there, who's 3. Now, right now, they'll be going over to Mary Crayville for winter break. So you're saying we're not sure yet what will happen when the new structure comes about?
Well, we're going to maintain those types of programs on breaks, for example, when people are we're going to maintain our daycare programs for those breaks and in the summer and those types of months. So
they'll be going to...
Right, we would either be going to the new facility or we will staff, for example, maybe at Gaines, we would just staff that location right there. Because it's a whole lot closer if you live in Gaines to go to Gaines than to come out here, but yes.
There's an air conditioner.
Yeah, sure, that's the caveat. Okay. Good.
Thank you.
Yep. Yes.
Can I ask a cool, not very critical question? Are we on to that yet? Is that all right?
Yes. Are there any other questions about Mary Crapo, comments, anything? Okay. Is it about the facility study?
No, about the academy.
Oh, about the academy. Oh, sure, yeah, go ahead.
So with them moving to the high school, where would they be eating their lunches? Would that be back in the general population with the high school, or are they going to have their own area for that also?
They will not be in the general population with the high school. Mr. Thompson, could you talk a little bit about how we've done that in the past and explain kind of the plan for that?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. It's an honor to be here, and as the captain of the ship called USS Academy, we are very much open to whatever is best for our students. So for the food, before all of the food was brought over for years. So we're looking at the food not going into a car, coming over. We're looking at from the kitchen, just coming over into our facility. So we will still have our own identity. The food will actually be better than it was before because of the transit, not because of the cooks. We love the cooks, just because of the process. So that's where we're at with that.
Great. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay. Yep.
The academy, how many kids are we talking about?
The academy has, right now, we've had...
So right now we're at 125, but again, what you have to understand is we're non-traditional alternative. So on any given day, we have up to maybe 70 bodies in there because we do it very different. Some come on a Wednesday night, some are on an individualized plan, as all of them are. So 125 bodies are not always in that building. Okay, thus how we can support many of our different students and what they need.
So my question is, how does that affect parking?
So there is actually ample parking space at the high school between the existing lots and over on that side to facilitate that. So we'll be looking at where staff park, where students park, all of those types of things.
Yeah, because the staff park by the academy, right?
They park right now in front of the gym area. A lot of them do, yes.
Which is where you were talking, right?
Yes.
So they would have to park over there and come all the way over here to the academy?
So the building's a good-sized building. There's a lot of parking on the west side of the building, and so we'd be talking about creating some different staff areas for them to park on that side. If their classrooms are over there, there would still be a large number of staff parking in that parking lot as well. So, because you're going to have staff that have classrooms that are maybe on that side of the building, some that are on the other side of the building, so their parking would be closer in relation to where their classrooms actually are located. Yep.
Will the academy be on the same start and time schedule as the high school, or will they start a few minutes later, a few minutes earlier?
So the academy operates in a completely different context than when we went to school. So they don't have a start and end time. It is a individualized program. So he does have some times, and I'm speaking, you can speak to this, so explain.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So yes, indeed, we go by the same time as the high school because we use the same buses. But again, students are individualized. Our classes are online, and they're supported that way.
Yeah,
so,
kids go there.
yes, sir. Yep. And so it will be the same time. And back to the vehicles, our dominant max of vehicles is maybe 5 of our students. Most of our students do not drive. They're either dropped off or go by the bus, just as historically how many of our students have a vehicle.
We hate big crowds, so I mean,
Yep.
by bringing, after everybody's in the building, it's a lot easier.
Right, and so we will have a separate entrance, sir.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that understands.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so the question nobody's asked is, what's it gonna cost us? Are we going for a bond, or do we have money to do all of this? Or are you gonna throw it to us a couple months from now? We need money to do this project.
No, I'm not throwing any of this to you to say we're going for any kind of bond. This is built into our existing cost structure. And through the savings that we would realize over the course of operating, this pays for itself in a very short period of time. So we feel that, you know, we're going to be, I think on your sheet it says annual savings of about $92,000 a year. You know, this gets paid for through just operating efficiency relatively quickly. So, yeah, this particular piece is not asking you for any money. That's not what this is about. This is more what we have to do right now, because otherwise we're going to have to spend the same amount of money on Mary Crapo, and then it's what's the next amount of work that's going to need to be done. So
We're
that's
gonna spend that money and keep spending that money every
Exactly.
year, so $6.2 million will be there.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Great question. Anybody else? Yeah.
Not a question, but just a comment. And I know this was really popular a couple years ago when it was about closing a building. People get very attached to a building, and I speak from my own family as well, because my dad went
Sure.
teachers both to Mary Crapo.
Sure.
I personally agree it's a must for us as a district. But I really think people need to separate those things. Stop associating a program like CBC or the academy with a building. So it's more or less a comment. People
Sure.
want to cling to something, and it's just not something we should cling to anymore.
Sure.
It's a building that needs a lot of work, and the programs will still be there.
Mhm.
Just need to move them.
Sure. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from anybody on the Mary Crapo conversation? Okay, well, what we'd like to do is maybe take a 5-minute break, and then what we'll do is we'll get into kind of the high-level overview of our facility study. I'll walk around, or the board will be here if you have any specific questions or individual questions, and then we'll look to start at maybe 6:50 going into the facility study. So thank you for being here this evening. So I'd like to just start this segment to say that we are going to devote a whole lot less time to this than we did the first part of the presentation. We are going to come back to you in January, possibly February, with a much broader and deeper dive into the facility study. Do any of you have your copy with you?
I do.
Mr. Engel, can you hold that up? So this is a 400 or 500 page document. We're not going to go into all of the details on that, but what I can tell you is that this facility study was comprehensive. And the reason that we did the facility study is this. I am not, you know, as much as handy as I think I am, as handy as our operations director thinks he is, we're not experts in all of the mechanical systems and everything else that goes on in commercial buildings. So we really needed to drill down and find out, what are the conditions of our buildings? What states are they in? What are the areas that need to be addressed? What are our code deficiencies? We have to know what we have before we can start addressing those needs. So what we asked is NJB Architects, and they're here, Lisa and Terry are here, I'm going to introduce them in just a second. They led this study, which was hundreds and hundreds of hours this summer and fall. And so they actually did prints of the buildings, they had mechanical contractors out, they were looking at every single square inch of the district. This study has condition information on the ceiling tiles in the closet of room 103 at Deke Elementary School. I mean, that's the level of specificity that this facility study goes into. So we're going to come back to you in another month or so with more. We'll have another public meeting where we'll share more of the details on this, give you more insight into what the facility study was about. But we wanted tonight to do a brief report to show you kind of the 30,000-foot view, give you a couple of the quick highlights. And so in order to do that, I'm going to turn this over to Lisa and Terry from NJB Architecture.
Thank you.
As Mr. Manning said, we did this lovely book. It's got a lot of stuff in it. Our first task out of the gate was to spend some really, really hot summer hours in those buildings because they are hot. We walked through every single building in the district, every room in every building that we could gain access to, which was the vast majority. We had to start there. We had to start there to see what you have. And we looked at it with pretty fresh eyes. So we didn't go in with any preconceptions. We weren't given any particular instructions. We weren't told we want to do X, Y, Z. We were just told, go in, take a look, tell us what you found. So that's what we did. We went through each and every building. We measured every building, so if nothing else, the district has current floor plans for every building in the district right now. So that's a good thing, and that's a great place to start. And, you know, the conditions in this building, they were a snapshot of the moment we were in there. These things change. It's an evolving thing. Buildings change every minute. We have new speed bumps. Those just appeared. So, you know, it is an ongoing thing. It's a living document, but this is a snapshot of the conditions of every building and site, so the property as well for each building in the district at the time we went through it. Some sort of large themes that we were able to sort of uncover and make recommendations about. Of course, first we looked at general condition. You know, what is the shape? How much life is left in carpet in this room, tile in this room? What is the life expectancy? What can you expect? And so we just sort of graded, you know, the ceilings, the tiles, the carpet, the walls. We also looked at, beyond just the general conditions and the aesthetics of the spaces, safety concerns, because they're inherent in buildings. Concerns of safety, particularly school buildings in this day and age. From the time every building in this district was constructed, the security issues with schools is completely different. It's a different world than when these buildings were built, almost universally. So there were some serious things to consider about how people gain access to the building, how they are prevented from gaining access to the building, how do parent traffic and bus traffic interact at all these sites, at these school sites. That's also something that's evolved over time. Once upon a time, probably when most of these buildings were built, parents really didn't drop their kids off at the buildings. Kids would either walk or they would bus, and so you didn't have this kind of parent bus interaction. So traffic on the buildings, entrance security, how do people get in? How do the staff within the building monitor who gets in? I mean, a prime example is the high school. The office is way in the middle, and that was pretty common in that era. It is not a great idea anymore, not in this day and age of security, needing to monitor what's going on outside, and being able to monitor and control access into the building. Site lighting. You know, just plain having lights. Like today, what, it get dark at like 5 o'clock. You need lights out there. It's pretty dark in the drive. Classroom entry security, the classrooms themselves. We hear about these lockdown situations in schools, and we heard of one fairly recently where quick action really averted a disaster. And so having the ability to control classroom access, to have electronic locking devices, those kinds of things. So entry within the building, entry within the classrooms. Other kind of code issues, of course, as was touched on with Mary Crapo, codes have changed immensely from the time all these buildings were built. Of course, at the time they were constructed, they were all compliant. Very few of them are anymore. Big one is accessibility. We have able-bodied students, and we have students that depend on walkers. We have students that depend on wheelchairs. We have all level of ability, and we need to accommodate all level ability. And you can't make those students feel singled out in those accommodations. So things like accessible restrooms, accessible doorways? How do they enter classrooms without having to have someone assist them? Those kinds of things. Particularly in the restrooms, most of the buildings really are in great need of accessible improvements. And those aren't necessarily costly improvements, but they are a huge enhancement to the quality of life to students who need those supports. Corridors. We have some issues with just plain old corridors are a lifeline to safety in a fire situation. And fire is the most dangerous thing in a building. So the corridor is the link to get our students out. A lot of the corridors in various buildings have some issues. They're not issues that they can all be corrected. But we did enumerate them and come up with some ideas for ways to improve fire exiting. And basically corridors have to be like a fire-rated enclosure so that people can get out safely in these non-sprinkler buildings, which most of these are, except for the PAC. A portion of that does have fire sprinklers. Fire alarm systems as well, which is an issue that came up at Mary Crayfeld. It's an issue throughout the district. The fire alarm systems just are not up to the current standards. So improving those would be a huge advantage to the students. Emergency lighting as well. When you have a fire or an emergency event, quite often the power goes out. You have to be able to find your way out, especially in these dark corridors that are interior to the building. You know, it's a nice safe place to get out, but if you can't find your way to the door, that's a problem. So emergency lighting. Similarly, we typically in buildings have to have a couple options for getting out. If there happens to be a fire in a corridor that's blocking your passage to the exit, students need to have another alternative, which is typically what we call egress windows. Those are the windows they can get out of if they need to. So there are quite a few that are okay and quite a few that are not. I think a lot of the elementaries, this building had some issues. So that is, again, just a safety feature. A lot of these things fall into the category of safety, but improving them would have other benefits as well. Improving the windows, of course, would make the building safer, but it would also improve the energy efficiency of the building. So a lot of these things we touch on and we list them to say, you know, life safety, but there are multiple levels of benefit. Ceilings and lights, you know, some of the ceilings could use a little updating. If we changed out the lights to LED fixtures, you would see immediate cost savings in operations throughout the building. And exterior doors. It's a common problem throughout school districts. They just plain get worn out. Of course, again, that door is the link between the student inside the building trying to get out. So we need doors to be in good operating condition. So if they're really rotted out and you have to bolt them shut, that's a problem. Other issues, again, I mentioned ceilings and lights. That's just sort of a general conditions issue. We looked at flooring, we looked at re-roofing. You know, it's a constant thing. It's just, you know, you always have to be aware. And that's one of the problems that school districts end up facing, is that you end up in a cycle of being reactive. So you start fixing things because it's, you know, it's leaking. What we did with this study was try to be a little proactive and look at down the road, what things should we be planning for? So what kind of re-roofing projects should we be looking at immediately? What kind of roofing projects should you be looking at further down the line so that you can be prepared for those? You notice there was an idea about where the academy could go within the high school. Of course, that displaces a couple classrooms. So we did look at the potential for addressing a couple things, some traffic flow issues in the high school, as well as realigning the art rooms. So we looked at some improvements in that area. Elementary schools, a lot of schools really needed some updated, what we're referring to as maker spaces. Education's changed a lot. It seems like we've kind of come full circle. For a while there, we were taking all the shops and the technical stuff out of schools, and now we're kind of figuring out that maybe that wasn't the best idea and putting them back, and particularly in the lower grades. So the idea of these kind of maker spaces, spaces that can function for really, really active learning, particularly in the science and technology realm, is something that would really be an enhancement to the elementary buildings. There's some issues around the high school, particularly the stadium area. We looked at some improvements there. Again, windows, that has multiple benefits for egress as well as energy savings. And then air conditioning, which kind of came up with the elementary daycare satellite issue. So we did have mechanical and electrical engineers come through the building and tell us exactly what that would take to put air conditioning in the various buildings within the district. Because it is something, it's getting hotter. It's getting hotter every year. And the school year seems to get longer. It starts earlier, it goes later. It's pretty unsufferable, for a good period of time at both the beginning and the end of the school year. So that is something that really should be weighed seriously, whether year-round education is the direction or not. I can vouch for how insufferable some of those rooms were over the summer. Classroom furnishings, if you just take a wander through any of the buildings, you'll notice a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Again, education has changed substantially since a lot of these furnishings were purchased, particularly with technology. The ability to have computers. When these media center tables were purchased, computers were probably in a corridor somewhere because they were mainframes and they weren't even in this building. So having furnishings that work with the current theories and teaching as well as technology, that's something that would be an amenity. And of course, technology throughout the district. That's an ever-changing field, and that's something that absolutely, to be a proactive district that is really keeping with the needs of the student, it just needs to always be on the radar. What needs to happen with technology, with electricity, how do we support technology, infrastructure, all those things. And that is the cliff notes of my 500-page document in like 10 minutes or less.
Well, let's give them a brief hand here. Thank you very much for all your time and energy on that, and we'll have them back. We're going to try and have another meeting, yet to be scheduled, but we'll have another meeting within the next month or so to do a little bit of a deeper dive. Just to recap a couple of the highlights from that: parking lots and traffic flow, through pretty much every building was something that was addressed kind of at a high level. Roof repair is necessary in a couple locations. She talked a little bit about, Lisa talked about ADA compliance and secure safe entries in each building. So these were some of the 30,000-foot view, but we will take some time to go into much more detail about what that looks like in the not too distant future. So that concludes this particular portion of the meeting.
That's one quick question. On your air conditioning, is there a way to project usage cost?
You could probably get some estimates from the engineers on that.
When I was reading that, that was one thing I thought, what's it cost to operate it? Okay, thanks.
Yeah, we can dive into that a little bit. The engineers, I'm sure they can give us an estimate.
Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa and Terry, and as Ben mentioned, thank you for all your work on this. You know this district physically probably better than anybody right now. And really the benefits when they can share the information in greater detail. We have such good information that will live for a very long time and that can be updated periodically. And so it's an exciting stage for our district, and I really appreciate all of your work. I know you walked many miles in the district. Thank you. So any,
Public comment.
yes, we have public comment opportunity. Anybody who wants to address the board, please stand, state your name, and try to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Anybody?
Melissa Neal, I just want to say thank you for doing an actual facility evaluation on the school district. Very much appreciated.
Thank you. I think it's long overdue. One was done probably about, what, 10, 15 years ago, but not as extensive as this one. And will give us an opportunity to do some pretty meaningful strategic planning. But I also want to thank Ben. As you saw, there's a lot of work that went into this presentation tonight, but more importantly, he very quickly got out in front of this when we learned that we were going to have some issues at Mary Crapo. He became very creative, contacted a lot of people, talked to the board members, and he went out into the community to start seeing what the climate was like. And we were all concerned. Obviously, this is a historic, almost historic building. You told me it's, what, 10 years away?
Yeah.
10 years away from being a historic building. So it's really exciting. If we do proceed with the property on Morris Road, we had a chance to go there last week, and I had absolutely no idea how big this place was on the inside. So it looks small from the outside, comparatively to Mary Crapo. Once you're in there and you can look past all of the examination rooms and the office in the front and everything, it's huge. And it's a great opportunity for our children. I mean, to have a nice building right off the expressway with all the parking and a great playground, and what will even be better. And I talked to a couple of staff members, and I know they're very excited about the possibility too. So thank you, Ben. Appreciate it very much. Anybody else? No? All right. Any board members? Any comments?
I just want to lend my support to NJB. Lisa and Terry we worked with them before, and I just have a lot of faith and credibility in what they do and what they're reporting, and I really, truly appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So when we reconvene in maybe January to talk about this in greater detail, I would encourage all of you to come and bring someone else in the community who maybe hasn't heard about it. And at that point, we should have made some progress towards maybe the purchase of the property on Morris Road. But it's up for a vote on Wednesday night this week. So I would invite you to do that. I'd love to see a room that's absolutely packed, and maybe we have to move to the PIC. So thank you. All right. With that, we will adjourn.